Hey, this is Mark Medina with the Los Angeles Times. We're presenting another edition of Lakers Roundtable, and this time we're not going to be discussing the Lakers off-season movement and free agency, that sort of thing. We're going to be looking ahead with Team USA and the FIBA Championships, World Championships coming up, and to help us dissect that roster and what Team USA could ultimately bring, we're talking to the New York Times college basketball reporter, Pete Thamel. Pete, how's it going today?
Mark, everything's great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I know that you were in Las Vegas not too long ago, and then you had mentioned in one of your stories just kind of the makeup of this team. No one from the 2008 Olympic team is currently playing. Kobe Bryant among them. His reason because he's resting some assorted injuries. And on a side note, Pau Gasol with the Spanish national team has decided to abstain. But when you look at Team USA's end as a whole, how does that change the complexion and dynamic of the team?
It's just a completely different team because it's, quite simply, Mark, not America's best basketball players. And while certain teams, Argentina is not going to have Ginobili, Spain's not going to have Pau, I do think that most teams are bringing a majority of their best players. Well, the United States, quite frankly, isn't bringing, any, at least or what were deemed the best players 2 years ago. So I think when you look at it, it becomes a challenge for the coaching staff. They've had some huge injuries on the front line that have really left them thin. I mean, Tyson Chandler, you cover the NBA, is a middling NBA center, and he's going to start at the 5 for this team. And JaVale McGee, I mean, most people who follow sports passively don't even know who he is, and he may make the team as the backup 5. So I really just think that between experience and size, this team has 2 gaping holes.
You also mentioned, Pete, versatility is going to come into play in terms of, who's going to get some minutes, what they're looking for as far as skill sets go. Where do you see that come into play in terms of the lineup there?
Well, it's going to be huge, and Lamar Odom is going to become one of the linchpins of this team. There's no question about it. He and Chauncey Billups are the veterans. The problem with Chauncey is that Rondo and really even more so Derrick Rose are going to play a lot of minutes. So while Chauncey will certainly play minutes, I don't think he's going to be able to have just the time on the floor to have the impact that Lamar Odom does. And what Lamar, can obviously do, and you've seen it in LA, Mark, he can play the 3, the 4, and the 5. He can stretch the floor. He can do a lot of different things. And I really think that they're going to need him to play big, to play very big, to be versatile, to pass the ball well, to help beat zones, to do a lot of different things. And I really think his versatility epitomizes what this team needs. Now, when you look at Kevin Durant, he's obviously a very versatile basketball player. When you look at Russell Westbrook, he can play the 1 and 2 and really guard you. Guys like that are going to end up playing more because without a 5, everything else is going to get muddled together. So one of the things Mike Krzyzewski said in Las Vegas, that made a lot of sense was, throw out your conventional notion of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, you mentioned Lamar Odom, and obviously that brings a lot of heavy interest from Laker fans. And I think you mentioned, and some other writers mentioned it as reports, that he's going to be playing a lot at center. And everyone knows a lot about just the versatile skill set that he brings and all that. But he normally plays at the forward position. Do you see any foreseeable adjustments, per se, in terms of how he needs to adapt to that role?
Yeah, he's going to have to sharpen his elbows, to be honest. The foreign game is much, much more physical than the American game. I talked to Jerry Wainwright, who coached an under-19 team over in one of these European tournaments a couple of years ago, and he said he spent a whole practice teaching his team how to foul hard because he wanted them to get used to both being on the giving and receiving end. And, with little things, little nuances, Mark, like screens, guys overseas, they allow them to kind of lean in the screen with the shoulder. So you're going to have to fight around. And with Lamar playing a lot more down low maybe than he's accustomed to, because obviously Pau and Bynum also take a lot of big man minutes for the Lakers. He's really going to have to not be afraid to get in the mix in these physical games.
We're talking with the New York Times college basketball reporter Pete Thamel, who's also following the Team USA road in the FIBA World Championship, which begins August 28th in Turkey. It's a tournament that Team USA hasn't won since 1994, And you can follow Pete on Twitter at Pete Thamel, NYT. And Pete, we've been talking about Lamar as far as maybe playing at some backup center and the adjustments he needs to make. One point that he brought up in his exit interview with us was that he wanted to maybe play a little bit at small forward for next season. Is that possibility with Team USA?
If there's one position where they're solidified, it's that 3. Kevin Durant is the only sure thing, take it to the bank, guy that Krzyzewski's got. And I mean, you obviously want to talk about versatility. He can shoot the pants off the ball, and they're going to obviously face a lot of zones. He's a condor with his arms and his reach. So I think, while on paper Lamar would like to play a little 3, I think, Kevin Durant could really end up playing heavy minutes for this team, more so than guys would typically play on these USA-type teams, because they, quite frankly, don't have that lighted-up scorer. And they're going to be relying a lot on him to put the ball in the basket. So I expect those two to be out on the floor at the 3 and the 4, per se, quite a bit together. Lamar for his experience and his savvy, and Kevin for just his analyzing talent.
Pete, you wrote about just the outlook that they have entering this tournament. You described them as the tenuous favorite, but you also noticed that they're one that's filled with uncertainty. Ultimately, how do you just see this playing out?
Right now, Mark, I don't think they're going to win. There's just too much working against them right now with the injuries they've had with the bigs. Brook Lopez obviously just decided to pull out because he's still struggling to recover from a case of mononucleosis. So I really have a hard time seeing them in a hostile environment in Istanbul, really winning. I mean, they will have the most talented team there, but they will have only been together for a couple of weeks, as is so often in these tournaments here. A majority of these teams have played together for years and years since they were teenagers, and now they're men. And this is just a very young team with a lot of vulnerability right now. And I don't know who's going to win, but I don't think it's going to be the United States.
Well, Pete, you mentioned just why you think the U.S. may not, be winning this tournament, and you mentioned some uncertainty as far as who would you pick as a favorite. Do you have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that you would pin down as having the most chance to win the tournament? Sure.
Brazil has size. Nene comes to mind as a guy who sort of epitomizes their bigs and their physical and different things. Argentina will be very tough. Scola's a great international player. Spain would definitely have to be one of the favorites, even without Pau. They have some great young players. They obviously have Ricky Rubio. A lot of people are going to be excited to see, but they also have some standby guards like Fernandez. Guys, quite frankly, that we're used to seeing in the NBA quite frequently. Turkey will also be tough. These are arenas, Mark, where they light up flares if teams aren't playing well. I mean, it's going to be a hostile, intimidating environment in a place where Americans aren't exactly going to be warmly received because of the current political environment.
Well, those are the thoughts from Pete Thamel with the New York Times. Pete, thanks a lot for joining us.
Mark, thanks for having me.